you did the first Ghostbusters,
Right.
did you have any idea that it was going to be this huge classic film?
No. I mean, I don't think you can really tell when you work on a film. There's sort of three movies that you make: the movie you intend to make, the movie that you make, and the movie that you thought you made. Because by the time people get through playing with it, you don't know what you got. So it's kind of hard to say what's going to be successful. And I've done a lot of films that people would have, thought was going to be just, huge, that didn't do anything. And other films that we did, The Hand of Rock's Cradle, and I didn't think anybody would ever even watch it, and it turned out to be a hit. And we did The Cowboy Way, that they tested off the charts, and they thought it was going to be huge, and it wasn't. So, except for some cowboys in Arizona who I met, but but it's hard to say. So I knew that Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and Harold, with the Saturday night, live stuff, I knew they were really popular. And I think when we were making it, because it was a big budget, you knew that it would do business, but the fact that I'd be talking about it 28 years later, I had no idea.
And then the Ghostbusters 2 came along as well then?
Yeah, Ghostbusters 2 came along 5 minutes. I'm a little, okay, all right. Where are we? No. 5 years after the fact, which I never could figure out why it took so long. I thought 5 years was long. Now it's been like 20 years, but since the last one. But it just took an awfully long time to sort of make it happen. But I think that's when you guys just screamed. I love being a part of it. I thought the first one was just really just much more original, but I made more money doing the second one. So
which does make a difference as well.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's people say you have fun. You have most fun when you're making money, and that's kind of cool too. So.
Now, do you? And this will be my last question for now. Do you remember the casting process, and do you remember who else was up for your role?
Well, you're talking about the first film or
the
both?
First film.
Or the first film? Yeah. I first heard about Ghostbusters from Ivan Reitman. I don't know if he'd remember. And Ivan Reitman is the producer, director of the movie. I did a movie with him the year before called Space Hunter for Columbia. And I heard about Ghostbusters, they were casting this big film, but my agent said there was nothing in it for me, and so that was the end of it. I never thought about it. And I saw Ivan Reitman at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles at the hospital on an elevator, and we were kind of riding down, and and he said, "Yeah, I'm doing this movie with Bill and Danny." I didn't know who Bill and Danny were. I mean, he just said Bill and Danny, like we all know. And then he said, "But there's nothing in it for you." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, good luck with that." And then I found out that there was a role that they were thinking about going black with the role, and everybody was getting in, and my agent couldn't get me in, and I didn't understand because I thought,
You had a nice ride in the elevator.
Yeah, ride in the elevator. We made another movie together. You make this assumption that you're all friends, but I couldn't get an interview. And this went on for a couple of months. I mean, and everybody I knew was going in, including guys who weren't black. I mean, he was seeing everybody. And then finally, we got this interview, and I got a hold of the script. I read the script, and it was a great, great character. I mean, it was like, I thought this. I was a single parent at the time, and I thought this is a game changer. I mean, if I get this role, I mean, my life is. And so I really went in here at Warner Brothers, where they were auditioning. And Ivan was there, and Harold Ramis was in the room, and I killed him. I was funny, man. That was good. When you go, yeah, and I just knew I had it. And then nothing happened for a couple of weeks, and then they brought me back again to put me on film. But I thought they had a camera in the room the first time, but okay, so I went back again and went on camera, and I nailed it again. And then they said, but we want him to come back again. We want to put him on camera. And so I went in again. And then I heard from my agent that they really, really liked me. It looked like it might work out. The casting director, Karen Ray, I don't know if she's around anymore, but Karen was. And then a month or so went by, and I didn't hear anything. And then I made the mistake that actors do. I called Karen and said, "What's happening?" But of course I tried to be clever. I said, actually I'm thinking about taking a vacation to Hawaii. And so I was just checking because I wanted to make sure that I was here in town in case it came up. I didn't want to be out of town. So she said, well, they're in New York, and there's an actor they want to see, Clavon Derricks. They want to see him. He's on Broadway doing Dreamgirls, I think. And so then they'll decide. So a week or so later, after all this stuff, they offered me the role, but they came back saying, well, Karen says Ernie's really desperate to do the role because he's been calling her, and she know he really wants to do it. So, that was the beginning of that whole thing. So it was kind of bittersweet. I mean, I went in, I fought for the role, I got the role, but it was a difficult, in many ways, very difficult job.
Just goes to show that you never really know who you're going to run into when you get into that elevator.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Mr. Hudson, how you doing?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. My name is Jonathan. I'm a filmmaking student. Just want to say I appreciate your work. First time I saw you was in The Hand That Rocks the Cradle,
right,
as a Solomon.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very good role that you played. I just wanted to know maybe where did you come from in terms of developing the character of Solomon, like as an actor, in terms of because it was very believable for me. I was very young at the time, but I still thought wow, that mentally disabled person really is a good actor, because that was the first time I ever saw you. And then when I realized that it wasn't that way, I was like, wow, I was amazed. So I just want to know if, as an actor, where would you maybe come from in terms of trying to develop that role, or?
Well, after The Hand That Rocks the Cradle came out, people would meet me and they go, "Hello, hi." So, but Ghostbusters did this weird thing to my career, and I've been working before Ghostbusters. I'd done some films, but when it came out, people began to think of me as a comedian. I'm not a comedian. I mean, those guys are from improv. I'm not. I'm an actor, and so getting dramatic roles were, it was just difficult. Even getting interviews. And so when The Hand That Rocks the Cradle came along, Disney was doing it through Hollywood Films, and once again, I had a hard time getting interviews. So sometimes you almost have to go, and you have to stay on the agent. You have to do everything you can do to get in the room, because I really related to the character. Even though the character was written as a 5'8" Irish, fair Irishman, whatever that means. And it didn't mean me, that's for sure. So, but I just felt really that if I can get in here and so I went into the meeting with Curtis Hanson. But in working on the character, which is what your question is, I went to a number of there are a lot of people who have relatives who are mentally disabled. You don't really hear about them. They don't talk about them. But when I started to question friends, I was amazed at how many people. One friend had put his daughter in a home when she was like 2. And that's where she still lives. So there are a lot of people who are out there. And then I found they have these, in San Bernardino, there's a Friday night party they go to. And so I went to some of the homes and met some of the people. When I first went to the party, I went in and people came over to me and they said hi, and they kind of hugged me. And I thought, oh, because, they know I'm a Ghostbuster. No, they did it to everybody. It was like, it had nothing to do with anything, But I found a guy who was, because sometimes you can be mentally disabled. They used to say retarded, which meant that your growth had stopped at a certain age.
Right.
But sometimes you can be high functioning in a certain area. And this particular guy I met, he couldn't live on his own, but he could really do these elaborate drawings, certain things he could really do really well. And, which is what Solomon had to do to be able to build a fence and all that. So, and he was the one I patterned the character on. Sort of, sometimes it's good to have a character who you kind of go, Also, I think I used to believe, I'm only stretching these answers out because I'm assuming you guys are curious, because I'm an actor and you're curious about acting. I used to believe that I could be different people. And I've since learned that you can't be different people. I mean, you just can't. You are who you are. But if your life had gone in a different direction and with different influences, you could be differently. And when I was a kid, I used to work in the fields and pick fruit. And this guy once kicked me, and I fell and hit my head and knocked me unconscious. And I mean, I was fine. At least I think I am. But I always wondered if something had seriously happened, and my, and I had gone in that direction. So Solomon was me if something had happened, and how do I, so, and that's how you just, to me, that's how you kind of, with a lot of characters, because acting is believing. So if I can create as much believability, then if I can believe it, then you can believe it.
Right.
If I can't believe it, then I don't expect anybody to believe it.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hello, Mr. Hudson. My name is Obioti, and I'm in the Masters of Fine Arts program at New York Film Academy. And
Great, congrats.
by the way, Ghostbusters was my favorite movie as a child, and so it's kind of weird talking to you right now.
Oh, cool, good.
But the question I have is, are there any regrets or are there any choices you regret making while in the industry? You can go back and say, I shouldn't have taken this role, or I shouldn't have, made this decision while in the industry. Is there anything that you regret doing while you were in the industry?
Any regrets? I don't really have any regrets in my life. I say that very casually, but I really, really believe that. I have some confusion in my life. I mean, I have those regrets that I really would have done it differently if I knew what exactly I didn't do right, but I don't know what that was. I'm not probably the most social person. I mean, when you're on the set and you're working with people who can have a lot of influence, maybe I should have been able to kind of hang out. I don't hang out. I was a single parent. I got kids. I got to go home. So then you think, well, maybe if I had played the game, whatever the game is, a little differently. So only that kind of stuff. And you kind of go, I've done pretty much what I've been offered. People say, oh, well, I really love your choices and roles. I go, what choices? I took the jobs that I had that came along, It wasn't like I've been flooded with a whole bunch of scripts. I'm not complaining. I mean, I made a very good living, and I I love the work that I do. But, yeah, it hasn't been a whole lot that there's some things that come up that you just know within your system that you just don't want to deal with. But for the most part, it's been, what's there, what's available. And sometimes there are things that they were interested in and you just said, no way. And then that turns out to be very successful, or something comes out and then you kind of go, man, I wonder if I had done that. But you realize that the actor who did it, or the person who did it, they brought something to it that you wouldn't have brought to it, and who knows? It doesn't mean that it would have been the same success, would have been the same thing. So, yeah. So, hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hudson. How you doing?
Hey, man, how
My
you
name's
doing?
Damien. New York Film Academy, doing AFA for acting. First of all, thank you for all of your work. Been a pleasure being entertained by you. But I was curious for the movie Congo. How many of the gorillas were actually real, and the ones that were fake? Was it hard for you to still imagine that they were actual, or pretend that they were real?
Well, when I go back to when I was 3 and 4 years old, and and I was a kid, and you play cowboys or whatever you play, so in order to really make it fun, you got to believe that you got to, you got to be there, you got to be a kid. So, no, I don't work with gorillas, real gorillas. So that means none of the gorillas are real in anything that I was in. But it's funny because a lot of people ask, because the Stan Winston, who did the animatronics or whatever, they did a great job. And in fact, I went to this Bikram yoga I've been taking recently, and the girl who is the instructor, she was Amy. I didn't recognize her, she was Amy in the movie, and she did a great job. But it's great when you have, they're believable looking, and you can it makes your job easier. If you got a marshmallow man that there's nothing there, and then they're trying to describe it to you, it's a little bit harder to go with it. But obviously that's what you're getting paid for. the in Ghostbusters 2, the train sequence where there's a train coming, and I get hit by the train, and Ivan Reitman, who directed it, I said, okay, now let me just so I'm clear. Now the train, I'm on the tracks and the train hits me. So yeah, I said, just like if you were on a train track and the train comes in, bam, you get hit. And I said, well, what is a train like? He says, like, it's a real, like a locomotive. It just comes down the track. And so when I got hit, I thought it's like I got hit by a locomotive. And then when I saw the movie, it was like this little choo-choo. It was like this fake choo-choo. It was like, that's not a locomotive. I don't know what I would have done differently, but sometimes when you see stuff, it's not at all. I mean, you can't really imagine the Marshmallow Man climbing up a building until you see the movie and you go, oh, that's the Marshmallow Man. Even though you got a little model of him, but it's still, that takes it to a different place. I don't even remember what your question was. But,
It was about the gorillas on Congo.
Oh, in Congo. So yeah, the gorillas in Congo, and I love Congo. And I love I love working on that movie, but none of the gorillas are real.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hello, Ernie. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Good, too. Thanks. My name is Stefan on the filmmaking BFA course here. I'm from Brazil, South America. In Brazil, we're still showing some TV channels, the TV series Oz. You did a wonderful job as Leo, the warden, in that TV series. I would like to ask you, how was for you to be part of that series? What could you say about that?
Well, years ago, after Ghostbusters, I did St. Elsewhere. It was a series called St. Elsewhere, and I played a fireman who had been burned and did about 8 episodes. And Tom Fontana, who ended up creating and writing all the episodes of Oz, he called me and said, remember we were working on the set and we said we'd love to work together. I didn't remember that conversation, but I didn't tell him that. And I said, yeah. So he was doing Oz and he invited me to play the part of the warden. And I was really, really impressed with the actors. I loved the show, especially the first 4 seasons. But I really was impressed with the actors. I thought they really put everything on the line. I mean, they went places that I think I would probably have trouble, sort of going to. But I was a warden, and but I just thought it was very groundbreaking, especially when it first happened. Now, of course, it might not be as much, but it was an interesting show to be a part of.
Nice. Thank you.
Sure.
And actually, on the same topic, Eamon Walker, that you worked with in Oz as well, is alumni of the New York Film Academy. So, if you guys hadn't realized that, so you had a very tight crew. You guys worked together amazingly well. At some points, when I actually watched the show, it brought chills. It almost felt like a reality show. Was that? I can imagine that was intentional. But when you're dealing with such tough subject matter, especially on set, how do you handle things like rape scenes and things along those lines? As an actor, how do you cope with that?
Well, it'd probably been harder to cope if I had gotten raped.
Right.
I mean, the guy, he would walk by and he'd look at me. I'm like, no, dude, don't even think about it. No, it ain't going to happen. I'm the warden. Thank you. But the other guys, some of this stuff was pretty intense. What I noticed was it was interesting because I love I love actors. I'm very humble because I can't believe that I'm actually an actor. I mean, I just think what they do is really cool, and so the fact that I get to do it. But I'm really impressed by when actors sort of put things on the line. But when I would go, and I have a little ritual with most characters, especially if you're doing a TV show, because you have to kind of do it every week and you have to kind of get up for it. It's a little bit different than when you're working on a film. So when I would go into Oz, I'd shine my shoes, I put on the uniform, I put on the suit. So now I'm the warden, and I'm not one of those guys who I got to be in character all the time. I mean, we just do it and it's done. Let's move on. 40 years ago when I first started, my kids couldn't call me by my name. They'd have to call me by the character's name. But you sort of change. But these are a lot of young actors, not young age-wise, but a lot of them just really starting out, and they were really into character. So when I'd go in, everybody's like, "Hey, Ernie, what's up?" and all that. But when I came out it's like they would just. It was like nothing. It was just really cold. And I'm like, hey, no, it just wasn't happening. And I just found that very odd. And also, they would be in a scene that we'd be doing, and they'd be like, like out there, you know. And I was like, okay, all right, so we got to do it like that. So we got to but yeah, it was fun watching them dig, you know, deep, and you know. We had one actor who got on the show, and I don't know how to talk about what he did without, because I don't want to mention his name, but he had an important role. I'll just say it like that. And so when he first came on, it was written a certain way. So he came on, he was in charge. He was sort of in my face. He was doing all this stuff. But then after about 3 episodes, he didn't realize that one of the prisoners was going to grab him, slam him down on the table, and rape him. You know, and Oz was just very visual. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, it didn't like you just fade to black and then, you know. So, and he was shocked because he had sort of told his family and had everybody watching, and he's starring in this series, and it was like, so, and just seeing him sort of deal with that, you know, to be, how do you, and then he had a hard time. So then he kind of disappeared for a little bit, and then he brought him back on the show, and it was kind of, the character was sort of working through the stuff, and then he gets gang raped, and so so I'm not laughing at it, but I just I was like, it's hard, you know what I mean? I go, okay, and you know, but it was an interesting show to be a part of. I'll just leave it at that.
All right, hello, Mr. Hudson. I'm a filmmaker. My name's Paul. I'm a filmmaking and acting student here, so I have 2 questions for you. First off is what led you to decide that you wanted to be an actor? What is it that drove you to act? And the second question is, what qualities of a director sets apart a director that you enjoy working with, that brings a great performance out of you, and a director that you find difficult to work with?
Okay, yeah. What brought me to acting was I grew up in a small town that was really economically depressed. Nobody in my family had been in show business. I mean, you know, it wasn't even part of a consideration. And so when I got out of high school, I wanted to find a quote-unquote good job. So my mother always told me, just find a good job. And I really, really tried. But, you know, I was just really so bad at everything. I mean, you know, you ever take those jobs and you think you're going to get fired because you know you're not good at it. I mean, it's like, even if they say you're doing a good job, you know you're not doing it. And I'm like, man. So when I found acting, when I walked into a theater and I was at home, I mean, I thought, I can do this. That's all. I just want to be able to do. I can do this. I mean, it's that was, you know, okay. Let me just, so I do this and get the lines down, and I get paid. That's cool. I mean, that's, so, you know, 45 years later, I'm still, it's like that. I mean, and people say, well, you did it because you love it so much. Yeah, I guess I'd love it, but I love the fact that I can, this is what I understand. It's like, this is what it makes sense to me, as opposed to other jobs that I probably could get through, but I just never really felt right.
Right.
And as far as directors, Curtis Hanson was one of the best directors I ever worked with. He did The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, and I loved Curtis because he was watching. I want to know that the director is watching, because the director has the overview of everything. I'm so into my character, I don't really care what's happening. I want to make sure that my stuff works, but I also know that I'm part of the story. And so I think it's wrong for me as an actor to step way out and take my character someplace that doesn't fit with what we're doing. So I appreciate a director who has an overview, and when he comes to me, he brings something, you know, he makes suggestions. I know he's thought about it at least. Even if we disagree, I know he's not just talking. Some directors make the mistake of feeling like they need to say something. And when it's stupid, it doesn't help, you know, because then I begin to lose trust in you. Mm-hmm. I did an episode of Tales from the Crypt, and it was a crazy character. He was this clown in the 1930s. This guy sees this, and I really feel bad for him. But anyway, he was a clown in the 1930s, and he was married to this lady who was leaving him and but he could read minds, and he was like this, so it was kind of a cool character. And he ate. He just loved food. He cooked all this food. And he just ate all this. He was like this 350-pound guy. And then they cast me in the part, which is just changed things. So the clown makeup looked like some kind of bizarre thing on me. My head was shaved, and the eating and the whole succulent thing, and it was. But the director, who was a very young guy, would just say stuff that didn't make any sense, and just would just annoy me, just really annoy me. And he would this thing with my wife, and I'm like, but this woman who's my wife, and I'm madly in love with her, and I know that I've already lost her, and so all that stuff that I and he's telling me how I should feel, and I'm like, do you even have a girlfriend? I mean, really, and so, but I just didn't feel he understood. He would do this. The worst thing a director can do is say, okay, Ernie, in this scene, you're really upset. So, can I see it? It's like, I just want to see what? He says, I want to see how you gonna look when you, and and then just so all the thing was just kept, and but so that's the worst kind of thing.
All right. Thank you very much.
We went to looping, looping where you go and you have to, but I've been really cool. I was holding all that stuff in. I didn't say anything. So we went to looping. And he just, God damn, he just kept, and I never did this to anybody before. So finally,
well, this is good because we're all learning from it.
So finally, he just came up with some stupid stuff, and it just, so he says, Ernie, I just so love working with you, and you're such a wonderful actor, and and how did you feel about me? And I said, you know what, man, and I just unloaded all this stuff came up, and it was really just a lot of stuff. And then, and after, when you feel so cleansed, but you see that he was just really crushed. And,
maybe he learned something from it.
Yeah, I think he's probably running the studio now, which is why I'm not working. But, so anyway, that's yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah. So if you're going to direct, for God's sake, at least have it make sense. Don't feel that you just need to direct somebody.
Hey, Mr. Hudson, how you doing? My name is Daniel. I'm also in the acting program here.
Good.
I know you've done a whole lot of work throughout the years, but from my understanding is you started as a writer. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I don't know if you just tell me a little bit about your transition into acting and how starting as a writer developed yourself as an actor and the kind of ways that it helped benefit you later on down the road with your career.
Well, I think as a writer, you are all the characters. You really, you're God. I mean, you sort of create the whole world. You know how these people feel. And I wanted to write. I did graduate work in writing, but then my first marriage ended, and I was a single parent, and so writing is one of those things, at least for me, that took forever to get done and to get paid. With acting, you go into a meeting, if you get the part, you get paid. Even if they change their mind and say, we want to go a different way, you get paid. I don't know if that still happens, but back in the good old days, that was the case. So, and acting is a meeting. I audition now, we start work next week, I get a check, I can pay my rent, the kids get fed. With writing, they really love it. I got a meeting over at the studio, we'll talk about it, somebody else has to read it, we really like it, can you make these changes, we don't have any money now, it's 6 months later, the kids aren't fed, and I got a problem. So I just put writing on hold, and now that I'm going back to it, the discipline I find very difficult to stay on task, because as soon as I get a job, I go off. I just shot a Western in Arizona. And so I think for actors, we work so little of the time. If you add up the actual work time that an actor goes through, it's only, you probably work a few days. I mean, there's not much time that we're on. But when you're on, you got to be on. You know what I mean? You've got to be there. And so when I work on the project, I'm there. And it's very hard to carry something, to be doing something else while I'm doing what I do. That's the problem I have, and it makes it very difficult to be consistent with the writing, even though I'm hoping I'm working on it. That's one of the things that I'm finding. But I think the writing is very important, and I admire people. I think writing, for God's sake, if you do something, try to get a piece of something. You know, it's all about ownership. This is America. You know, the good old days when acting was so, it's like, you know, we're the worker bees. So if you don't have a piece of something, and writers still, luckily because of their union and whatever, they still do participate in most things. So I would strongly recommend being part of the creative process if you can.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, I'm Haskell. I was just wondering if there's going to be a Ghostbusters 3.
Well, it's hard to make that turn. I keep hearing about Ghostbusters 3, and they say it's going to happen. And in fact, I got an email from someone saying that they had been invited to the casting process and that it's going to happen. I talked to all the guys, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, in the past year and a half or so. It's been about a year and a half now. And Ivan Reitman, I saw it. Jason's up in the air. This is like so. Anyway, I talked to Ivan Reitman, and so they say it's going to happen. So I hope it does.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, sure.
What do we have coming up on the horizon? What do we have to look forward to seeing in the future? A couple of different projects you might be working on we should look out for.
Well, I stay busy. I mean, what I find is that you have to make peace with what is, which is what I'm trying to do now. And so, you know, there are all those things that, you know, how I had imagined they would be at this point in my life, which is not the case. But it's not good or bad. It's just that it is what it is. And so, so I say this. I just finished a Western called To Kill a Memory with Kix Brooks. Kix is part of the Brooks and Dunn. You know, they just, you know, so we shot this film in Arizona, which is a lot of fun. It was a Western. And part of the joy of being an actor is we get a chance to try different stuff. You know, the writing and doing a lot of that stuff was just big fun. The shootouts and all that. The stuff you get to play with, like in Ghostbusters, you know, wearing the backpacks and chasing down the ghosts and. So that, and you know, I do a recurring on the show called Secret Life of the American Teenager. I play a psychiatrist on that show, and I do Transformers Prime, one of the animated series that's fun, and so I just basically stay busy. You know, John Schneider and I have a movie called Doonby, which is kind of it's sort of a mystery that we finished up about a year ago and should be coming out, I'm told, in the next couple of months. But I'm an actor, so I do what actors do. And
do you find yourself still having to go through the audition process? Are you finding you're offered more roles, or would there be a role that would come along that you would absolutely dive into if they asked you to audition over and over and over again, as they did with Ghostbusters?
Well, yeah, because I thought the character in Ghostbusters, I thought that was a career-changing character. Now, there are so many things that, as an actor, you don't control. The role in Ghostbusters that came in on page 6 and was this amazing role, by the time, and we did rehearsal, but by the time we got ready to shoot it, he came in on page 68. So that was a very different character than what I thought I'd be going into. Mm-hmm. Now, part of my growing up process is you have to adjust to what is, which was not an easy thing to do. So in the game has changed. I find most actors, no matter what they've done, or how successful they've been, people still want you to audition, to come in, to read. And so ultimately you have to make the decision, is it something I really want to do? Is it worth my going? Because if you want it, then you got to go and fight for it. And if you haven't saved your money and you need the job, you got to go in and fight for it even though you really don't want it, which is a really sucky place to be at. So, but yeah, most people still want you to come in, to audition, to do this thing. They seem to think actors, it's fun. I'm like, why is that fun? I mean, as a director, you might show some of your work, but you have to come in here and I feel like auditioning, like you really go in and you pull your pants down and you stand there and they say, okay, thank you, Ernie, for coming in. And then you kind of pull your pants up and try to be somewhat graceful about it and then walk out. I mean, that's an awful, but that's how it feels. The acting part is a lot of fun. The auditioning part, especially when they know your work, it's like, well, why am I here reading 3 lines? I mean, it gets like that. And you're lucky to be the guy who gets in and read 3 lines because the guy you know who had a series for 8 years, he can't even get in to get to read for the 3 lines. So the game has changed a bit, but but that's part of it. That's what we do, and I sort of take it that way. If you want it, you got to fight for it. I used to say there are only 3 reasons for working. One is it's a great role. I mean, I'll do anything for a great role. I'll pay you if it's a great role. I did a movie called Christ, I don't remember the name of the movie now.
Who else was it?
Everything's Jake. Everything's Jake. We shot in New York. These 2 students from Syracuse wrote this great script about this great character, and we shot it in New York. And I love the movie. It didn't. They knew how to make a movie, but they didn't know how to get it distributed, and the movie sort of went nowhere. But I love that character. So as an actor, give me a reason. If it's a great role, because I'm still looking for that opportunity to do what I know I can do, which I don't feel I've been able to do it. On stage, I did The Great White Hope, and that was everything I had. I haven't had that opportunity to do that in film. I love the fact that Brandon Lee got the Crow before he passed away, because I think it was very tragic that he passed away, but what a role to get a chance to show what you can do. So if it's no role, then pay me some money. I mean, I'd love to people, say, well, why don't you do that role? And I said, well, they gave me $10 million. And people go, oh, okay. I understand. It's like, but when there's no role and you have no money, I'm like, well, and why do I want to do this? Now, the third reason is if it's somebody, it's Spielberg. It's somebody who you think is going to be kind in the future and remember the favor you're doing for him, which doesn't happen very often anyway. But at least you go, I want to work with good people. So, Andy Garcia, who's a friend, he was here, I guess, a few weeks ago. Andy's in the movie, and somebody, so, okay, I'm doing it for that reason. But, I get offered films that the character is not even well developed. There's no money, and I don't even know the people doing it. So I'm like, well, and actors, we have a hard time saying no. I was listening to Betty White's book on tape, and she was saying it's just very hard to say no. It's like, oh, it's a chance to work. Maybe I should take this because maybe it might be seen, and maybe. So, but good roles are hard to find.
Now, they also say that the best directors in the world usually started as actors. So that leads me into my next question. Do you have any directing projects on the front, or is this something that you're interested in doing in your career?
I think to be a good director, you really gotta like to run the show. You really gotta like to be the guy who organizes everything and pulls it together and the guy in charge. I don't like being a guy in charge, you know what I mean? I like doing what I do. I know that sounds lazy, but get it together. The actress just left and we don't know why, and she's in a trailer. You go talk to her. I don't want to be the guy to talk to her. You know what I mean? I want to do what I do. So that wouldn't make me a very good director. I do like writing because in my world as a writer, I control everything until you take it and screw it up. But until then, it's my world. So and I know that about myself, So I don't really, if there was a project I was really passionate about with good people. When I was in college, I did a lot of directing. And for stage, and actors are so, they get into their stuff and they're late and it's very frustrating. I'm not the kind of guy who likes to control it. Some guys love that. It's a challenge, and I'm not one of those people. The hardest time I have now finding a good assistant is I'm like, you know what, never mind, I'll just do it myself. So I end up paying somebody. I end up doing all the work anyway. It doesn't make sense, but that's my flaw.
And what type of genre, when you're writing, what do you find yourself writing a specific type of genre, or is it just whatever comes to mind?
Well, I like the idea of just going with whatever comes to mind, but I'm really fascinated with some parts of history. And there's some characters and some stories that really need to be told. I don't think we really have a good sense of who we are as a people. And I think that really is a little bit of the problem. We don't remember very far back, like 10 years ago. But a lot of that stuff is still affecting us now, and I think those stories, if told from an honest perspective, I think could do a lot of good. And they're fascinating stories, and I don't think Hollywood in general is very good about telling those stories. They start out sometimes, but by the time people get through playing with them, you can't recognize it as having any value, which is why new filmmakers can come in and maybe tell a little differently. I don't think Hollywood, we've sort of lost our edge, which is why I think foreign films are sometimes much more interesting, because I think they're a little bit more honest.
And also, Lou Gossett Jr. is actually an instructor here at the New York Film Academy,
really?
and we asked him to come actually speak and interview Billy D. Williams while they were here, which was actually quite an interesting exchange between the two of them. For those of you that saw that, what I have a question about is, you've been in the business for so many decades. They talked a lot about racism and how they had to deal with that early in their career. Did you find anything? Was that something that affected you as well, or do you find that never even affected you and you just kind of were an actor and that's all you see yourself as?
Racism. Let's see. Have I ever experienced racism? Of course it's a part of our society. It's in everything. It's everywhere. Things are much better now, and I think people are we're kind of oblivious to it. Things are a certain way, but it's not something I wake up in the morning thinking about. It's not something I feel I'm at a disadvantage about or because of. But I do know that it has an impact on, and I think it's a very dangerous slope, so to speak, because once you sort of start seeing things from that perspective, you see everything from that perspective. Everything that happens to you, you can go, it's because of, which is probably not true. So I try to keep things more on me. I like to claim responsibility for everything, because it's the only thing you can do anything about is you, really. So, maybe the reason certain things didn't happen was because, well, let's face it, you look at TV, there's some, black roles, but, you get a movie about a family and this and all these things happen, and having a black character involved is not the first thought. So you probably, if you watch TV and see 3 shows with a black character on it, you go, oh my God, black people are everywhere. It's so unusual. Most of the work I've done, I've been the only black character. The Western I just shot, I was the only black character in it. It's kind of an afterthought, and unfortunately it doesn't open the door to a lot of new people kind of coming in, and so racism is very much, but it's almost an unconscious thing. I don't think it's necessarily a deliberate attempt. I think people just aren't aware of, they talk about black disadvantage, but nobody talks about white advantage. But then, the guy who's paying the money is telling the story, and I don't deny a person's right to tell his story. Woody Allen can tell his story the way he sees it. But the way he sees it is not a New York that I see when I go to New York. But that's his world, and certainly he has a right to make his movie. And if I don't step up and make my movie, then I guess I should just shut the hell up and hope he gives me a job in his next movie. That's that it is what it is. I think, but so I'm not going to sit and say no, I've never experienced that. But I don't feel that my life is diminished because of,
as a result of that.
As a result of anything. The great thing about my life is I get to be Ernie Hudson. So, and I think that's kind of cool. So I don't see any disadvantage.
And do you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life?
Oh, it's the only thing I know how to do. You know, I do it as long as, you know, I mean, I'm not very good at anything. So, you know, I mean, I could write, but doesn't mean anybody going to pay me any money to do it. So this is what I'll do until, I'm not saying I wouldn't do anything else, but, you know, I mean, I've always worked, even as a kid. So I figure I'll, you know, find a way to make a living doing something. But
hopefully it's the same thing that you've been
hopefully
doing.
it's the same thing I've been doing, and hopefully you bring something to the table, and hopefully there's a reason why people, I mean, why would somebody give me a job? You hope you bring something. I mean, if you're going to do something, then for God's sake, do it well enough to where you bring, you know, I don't want, you know, you don't want to be in a situation where somebody gives you a job as a favor, you know, or because they want to sleep with you. I have no problem with people wanting to sleep with me, but I like to think I got the job because I'm the best person. Because I bring something to the table. I mean, you've got to be that good. I like to believe that they cast me because I really was the best person out there, and not because, you know, I knew somebody. But that's just me. I'll take the job however I can get it, but I like to believe that it's because I'm really good. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I would like to thank you on behalf of the New York Film Academy. I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself.
Thank you so much.